All right, check the mic. We are live from Circa Sportsbook. It's loud here. I'm trying not to be too loud, Sam. I guess we were yelling last night, but we got our instant reaction for Week 18 going right here. We're getting ready for Vikings-Lions. That's coming up here soon. This is not our full show. This is our normal instant reaction show, and then we'll be back right after Lions-Vikings for the full Week 18 review. But let's start right now. The playoffs almost locked in. They are locked in the AFC. Denver gets the win over the Chiefs, so they get the 7 seed. So first game to talk about Broncos-Bills next week. That's your 7 versus 2 matchup.
Yeah, I mean, that should be fun. I mean, we set this whole thing up, right? The Bengals needed a million things to break their way, and everyone except one of them went their way. Unfortunately, the thing that didn't go their way was the Kansas City Chiefs resting everybody, starting Carson Wentz behind a terrible offensive line, and getting wrecked by 38-0 by the Denver Broncos.
It was never really a game. Broncos get the win 38-0. Bo Nix with a ridiculous – did you see the final stat line?
No, what did he end
for
up
Bo
with?
Nix? He goes 26 of 29 for 321 and 4 touchdowns. So 4 touchdowns, 3 incompletions for Bo Nix.
Does 4 get him the touchdown rookie record, or is he still behind Justin Herbert for that?
I don't remember where Herbert was. I wasn't expecting him to be pushing that.
Right.
But Marvin Mims, 2 touchdowns. Bo Nix also 47 yards on the ground to lead the Broncos.
Again.
They pretty much dominated the game from start to finish. Yeah. Kansas City never found any rhythm with their backups on offense. And then defensively, Denver attacked downfield early and often and made a lot of big plays.
Yeah, it really was never a game. I mean, the Broncos scored early. They got a stop early. They got another touchdown. It's like, this is already done. Imagine being Joe Burrow and the Bengals watching this and being like, rooting for everything to go your way. Miami blew the game as well. So literally, this is the only thing left. And it's like, very quickly, they would have been convinced, you know what, this is not happening.
This was a fascinating day at Circa generally, too, before we get into the rest of the AFC, because there's a lot of people here who played their Survivor contest, the $1 Million contest as well, their weekly pick'em game. And there was literally millions of dollars on the line here today. A lot of people rooting for the games that didn't matter a ton. Jags and Colts, Cardinals, 49ers. There was so much going on here. A lot of excitement, a lot of energy in the room as people had hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line.
Right, like these teams that are sort of that went in, like a lottery consortium for an entry. And I was talking to the GM of the place. He was saying that with the Cardinals winning, everybody still left was guaranteed, I think, $1.7 million. If the Cardinals had lost, the share pool would have gotten bigger, and they would have been guaranteed $2.1 million. So a ton of money on the line, often for terrible games.
Yes, so those games were front and center, despite not having playoff implications. All right, back to the AFC here. So yesterday, because the Steelers lost yesterday, that put the onus on the Chargers to take care of business against the Raiders. They did that. So with that win, the Chargers get the 5 seed. They're going to Houston next week. Steelers are going to the Ravens next week. So Chargers, really nice offensive effort, including 13 for 186 from Quentin Johnston for the Chargers today.
Yeah, so we were talking yesterday about, Pittsburgh essentially blew the opportunity to keep hold of that number 5 seed and take on the Houston Texans. And we were focusing on, well, at least they're going to a familiar foe, a division rival and a team that they know how to play. But the other element of that is the Chargers still needed to take care of business to take advantage of the gift that they were given by Pittsburgh. And they did. It was a grind for a while. The Raiders hung tough, but then eventually the Chargers took control. And that seed, that 5 seed in the AFC is potentially, who knows how it'll work out in the playoffs, but theoretically, the Texans are kind of stumbling into the postseason. They do not look like a strong team relative to, the other strengths in the playoffs. That's a prize, that 5 seed. You would look at this and say the Chargers are legit, like dangers to take away, to win on the road and advance in the playoffs.
So Chargers at the Texans. Steelers with the 3rd matchup now against the Ravens, the 3 versus 6, and then Denver going to Buffalo for the 7 versus 2 seed. Of course, Kansas City, the number 1 seed. That's your AFC playoff picture.
Yep.
In the NFC, we still have the number 1 seed to figure out. It's Detroit or it's Minnesota. The loser now is going to Los Angeles. And we mentioned this on yesterday's show. The Rams made a decision today. They had a chance to play for the number 3 seed. Tampa Bay gets the win today, so they locked up the NFC South. They're going to be the 3. So let's talk about Tampa Bay. I want to say they almost blew it against the Saints. The Saints, as massive underdogs, gave them a game, but Tampa Bay gets the win, 3rd straight NFC South title for the Bucs.
And Baker Mayfield just decided he was not going to let them lose this game. He really took over in critical situations. Like his overall numbers are not going to look great. 221 yards, 2 touchdowns, an interception. But key downs, 3rd and 8 from his own end zone, he converts. 3rd and 14, I think a couple plays later, he converts. 68 yards rushing on 9 attempts, 7.6 yards per attempt. When the chips were down, when they needed those plays, Baker Mayfield decided he was just not going to let them lose that game, and they needed it. I mean, that window, you had Tampa Bay really struggling against the Saints, who were up for a lot of that game, and the other side of the coin that needed to go was Carolina and Atlanta, battling in this incredibly tight game. And then eventually Baker just decides, no, look, we're not screwing around with this. I'm taking control.
Those were fun games to watch side by side, seeing Atlanta and Carolina going back and forth, and Tampa Bay trailing New Orleans. You were right on, though, about Baker and what he did in the fourth quarter. A 4th and 8 absolute dot to Jalen McMillan, and then an even better throw, I think, for a 32-yard touchdown. That was what gave Tampa Bay the lead. Then he had a 28-yard scramble on 3rd and 14, right? It was every time they needed a play, Baker Mayfield made the play, and credit Jalen McMillan for making those plays as well. And then they got Mike Evans the 1,000. They were supposed to be kneeling it out. He needed 5 more yards. They got him 7, 8 yards, whatever it was. Mike Evans with the 1,000 yards. And it's kind of funny. I mean, it doesn't, to me, I don't care about the perception of a few extra yards, but they cared, and it was cool how much Evans and all of his teammates cared about that.
It is fascinating, though, in this world of, analytics guys are getting paid to steal 1% win percentage chance. I wonder how much of a win percentage chance they put on the table simply by running a play. Because you kneel the game, it's done, right? Like you just snatched the win back from the Saints. You took control, you got the ball, victory formation, it's done. You've got the playoffs, you're away. And at this time, Carolina Atlanta is still going. It's not definitive. So theoretically, the Bucs season is still on the line, and they decided we can run a play to Mike Evans to get into the 1,000. Imagine if the Saints had picked that off, jumped the route, run it back for a score, and all of a sudden they can go for 2, win the game. The Bucs dumped themselves out of the playoffs by trying to get Mike Evans 5 yards on the play. I mean, it didn't happen. They won the game. They got Mike Evans. Everyone's happy, right? But that would have been maybe the most catastrophic play in NFL history if it had gone the other way.
But it didn't. Evans got his 1,000. Bucs get to the playoffs. We'll talk more about the matchup in a second. But while that was going on, Carolina and Atlanta are going blow for blow, back and forth. Michael Penix Jr. and Bryce Young. Unbelievable game, man.
Yeah.
Bryce Young, 5 total touchdowns, 2 on the ground, 3 passing. Big-time throws left and right. They win it in overtime because that's what the Panthers do is play a bunch of overtime games.
Right.
So they get the win. Miles Sanders with the game-ending touchdown. But another game where Michael Penix Jr., big-time throws down the field, attacking and aggressive, and Atlanta's offense putting up 38, but not enough in their quest trying to sneak the NFC South.
Yeah, it was a really fun game. I mean, Bryce Young was pretty spectacular in this game. Michael Penix was spectacular sometimes and not spectacular other times. It was sort of a roller coaster ride watching him play. Drake London ends up with 187 yards on 10 catches, 2 touchdowns, was really the only person that the offense was going through. Ray McLeod made a couple of plays. Daryl Hodge had an amazing sideline catch, but it was really just Michael Penix finding Drake London over and over and over again. Bijan Robinson with a huge day as well. Yeah, it was fascinating watching those 2 games side by side. Kudos to CBS, by the way, for keeping the score of the other game up on the top left so you could keep track of it. Fox wasn't doing the same thing. They were just letting you hang. Who knows what the score is in the other game?
We just assume you have YouTube TV or something, or you're at Circa watching all the games, which we were. Circa doing a great job getting all the games front and center for us. So Tampa Bay, not only do they win the NFC South, but it was in my head this entire time that they had to be the 4 seed, not realizing, the Rams could lose. And they did. And the Rams, made a decision to start Jimmy Garoppolo, sit their main players. They still almost won the game. But because of the Rams' loss to the Seahawks, the Bucs get the 3 seed. They're playing the Commanders at 6. And the Commanders' loss, their win against Dallas and the Packers' loss to the Bears is what, shook all that up. So Tampa Bay at 3, hosting Washington at 6. Rams move to the 4 now as the NFC West champions. They went down the wire with Jimmy Garoppolo, Geno Smith with 4 touchdown passes for the Seahawks. They got the win. So now it is the Rams somewhat making a decision that they're okay with hosting the loser of this matchup tonight, Lions and Vikings.
Yeah, I mean, they obviously made that determination. To their credit, they almost won the game anyway, right? That's presumably part of that decision-making process was them deciding Jimmy Garoppolo is a solid quarterback. We could win anyway. So that was part of it. There's also the element we talked about earlier where this kind of guarantees them an indoor route the whole way. That's probably a benefit in their eyes. Not the deal breaker, not the reason they did it, but probably fits in the pros column of going this route.
That's if it's chalk all the way. Like if Washington or Green Bay pulls an upset, that changes everything. Sure,
but you gotta, playing the percentages, you're assuming this is more likely we stay indoors as opposed to have to go on the road to Philadelphia. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting call, and it has worked out in that way. So we're going to get to see, how important that rest is. Washington, Tampa Bay, I think is a really fun matchup in the opening round as well. And then Green Bay loses to Chicago and ends up being the 7th seed, and they're on the road to Philadelphia.
Chicago looked like they were trying to do everything they could to lose that game. Kept feeding Keenan Allen, not passes, but plays where he could pass. End arounds, and one was an awful interception. But they get the game-winning field goal, finally get the monkey off their back, so to speak, beating the Packers, even though Jordan Love gets injured, comes out early. Malik Willis finishes the game for the Packers. I think Love will be okay going forward. They just probably weren't taking any chances there.
No, yeah, absolutely. I think that was the case. I mean, generally, this was a strange week. Like, people were comparing it to a preseason week of football. Like, the number of either backups or just not starting quarterbacks that were featuring this week was kind of crazy. And the number of games that didn't mean that much. We talked about it on the preview show and just going through these games like, well, nothing to see here. Well, next, it was kind of a weird week of football. So we were saying this, it's a fun week to do the Circa thing because, you don't necessarily get to see the same level of in-depth stuff that we do in our normal week. But this is the week to do that because so many of these games were bizarre.
We might not have copious notes on every game coming out of this week, but the storyline aspect of it, I think, is still huge.
Yeah.
Anything else from a playoff picture perspective here? Of course, again, we're getting ready for Sunday Night Football like everyone else is. Lions and Vikings coming up here soon. I can't wait to see the whole setup here at Circa, what that's going to feel like and look like here with the number one seed on the line.
It's always on paper, right? And, it doesn't mean it's going to play out this way, but I don't think there's a bad matchup on paper. All of those games are compelling to me. Green Bay, Philadelphia, we've already seen that earlier in the season. It was really close.
2 week one rematches, by the way. Yeah. Washington, Tampa Bay, and Philly, Green Bay.
Washington, Tampa Bay is a fun matchup now. Whether it's Detroit or Minnesota playing the Rams, that's fun. And then the AFC as well. Like Denver, I think, is a live threat to Buffalo. They're good. Pittsburgh, Baltimore wouldn't have been the most fun matchup except their division rivals. So if we get the first encounter, it's ball game, right? If we get the second encounter, then it's not as fun. And then the Chargers, I think, are a real threat to Houston. So I think all those matchups are fun as well. And then the other side of today was the top of the draft order.
So let's talk draft here. As of right now, it's locked in. The Tennessee Titans are on the clock. They're picking number 1 overall. Cleveland Browns will be number 2. And because of the New England Patriots win, it's the Giants at 3, Patriots at 4. Not only did New England win to go 4-13 behind the great Joe Milton, Gerard Mayo has been fired almost immediately right after the game. So that's the first Black Monday hiring happens here on the Sunday of Week 18. Robert Kraft wasting no time. Gerard Mayo, one and done here for the Patriots.
Yeah, and evidently that was in the can. They had the pre-prepared statement. The whole thing was done.
I like to think that he was typing it up in the owner's box during the game.
The way reporters do, I got a deadline to meet. You're writing up the game report as the game's going on.
I would rather make up a fake story that he put the code red in to lose, and Mayo won the game, and that's what did it.
That would be fun.
They lost the number 1 pick.
I feel like that's not what happened, but it would be fun.
Realistically, though, for the Patriots, so Mayo's out. I believe they're going to be going after Mike Vrabel. Right. I believe that's the former New England ties. Maybe you say, well, Mayo is a former player, Vrabel's a former player, but the issue for Gerard Mayo that I think Robert Kraft was hinting at was he wasn't ready. They already had their own questions internally if he was ready to become a head coach. Vrabel's done it before and has the ties. I think that's the guy they're going after. And then coming out of that, it's not the same thing as losing a quarterback number 1 overall if you're in New England, but you lost the power to trade. And now, as you were saying all day and you tweeted out, top two teams now, Tennessee and Cleveland, both need quarterbacks in probably a 2 QB race at the top.
Yeah, that is fascinating. So it brings up a couple of things. Number one, does every team view those quarterbacks the same, right? Does every team view number one, do they view those two guys as good enough to go at the first or the second overall pick, right? That's element number one. Number two, does these multiple QB needy teams outside of the top two picks, does that change the dynamic with a guy like Drew Aller from Penn State, who said he's going back to Penn State? But all of a sudden, if somebody would be to let it know to his agent that
there were rumblings. There were already rumblings, Sam.
Like, you could go top 5
if
you came out this year, because the teams that are in the top 5, top 10 have missed out or are going to miss out on the top 2 guys. You could be going at the top of this first round, not 28th or whatever. Like, you might want to think about it. I think those things are really interesting elements to all this.
So now the top 3 teams all need quarterbacks, right? Titans, Browns, Giants. You could argue the Browns less QB needy, maybe, just if they're going to delay it. They could delay it a year if they really wanted to. They could convince themselves. Do they want to move down a little bit? But the top 3 teams, Titans, Browns, Giants, all need a quarterback. 6 with the Raiders. 7, presumably, with the Jets, all need quarterbacks. And 9 with the Saints. So 6 out of 9 teams there that have quarterback need.
You also get the potential that we had last year when, remember, everyone was debating, does New England take a quarterback, right? Do they take Drake May, or do they take the trade package that will be offered for Drake May and move down and punt on quarterback for a year and come back and do it next year? They elected to say, remember, the Giants were offering them those trades, right? They eventually said, no, we like our guy, we're taking Drake May. Based off what Drake May looks like, you would say, good call. But we might have the same situation where one of these 2 teams at the top might be getting those same trade calls, right? Might be from the Giants again. And this time, whether it's because they just like that option better or because they like these quarterbacks less than the Patriots like Drake May, but this time we might see them take that deal and say, okay, fine, we'll give the trade to the Giants. We'll give the trade to the Raiders. We'll come back next year and we'll take the trade package this year, and build that way.
It's going to be a fun discussion this offseason. So top 5, Titans, Browns, Giants, Patriots, Jaguars rounding out the top 5. And then, as I mentioned, Raiders and Jets next 2, who both probably need quarterbacks in there.
Yeah.
As far as yesterday, the Bengals took care of business to at least get to today to kind of hope to get into the playoffs. You mentioned a couple weeks ago they needed 9, 10 things to happen. They got all but 1.
Yeah.
The Jets beat the Dolphins. They needed that to happen.
Yep.
The Dolphins would have had a chance to get into the playoffs with a win. All didn't matter because the Broncos destroyed the Chiefs' backups, but was interesting how that all came down to the end. A little unfortunate that you didn't get the competitive Broncos-Chiefs game for the drama, but for Cincinnati to at least get that close after a 4-8 start, it was almost pulled off the
It's
miracle.
like late in games, with a comeback, and eventually it comes down to the onside kick that's now a 2% probability.
It's done.
It's just kind of a bummer.
Yes.
I mean, ultimately, the lesson is always, well, don't leave yourselves 3 scores down with 3 minutes to go. Like, the lesson is that. So for the Bengals, the lesson is, well, don't leave yourself needing 58 things to go your way in order for you to get into the playoffs. Don't lose to the Patriots in week 1, right? Don't, put yourself in a position where you need all these things to happen. It is, however, just from a story point of view, kind of a bummer that we didn't see at least a close game between Denver and Kansas City to make it nerve-wracking, right? Instead, it was just immediately, the Bengals are done.
And as you said at the top, the hottest game here was Colts-Jags.
Yeah.
There's a whole contingent of people here who literally had hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line to make their more millions.
A game that went to overtime, right? Can you imagine the stress involved with $1.7 million, at least $1.7 million on the line, with Joe Flacco against the Jags in a meaningless Week 18 game going to overtime? I cannot even fathom the stress.
I mean, there were tears over here when it hit. I mean, there was
champagne.
There's a lot of pizza. There's pizza over here. But we're having a good time over here at Circa. They're taking good care of us.
Was that if I had like $100 on that game, I would be like sweating that out,
seriously.
Stressing my mind. These guys are literally there. Like $1.7 million is riding on Joe Flacco deciding to hit his receiver or like blindly throw the ball backwards at any given moment.
All right, let's remind everybody what's going on here. We're all getting ready for Lions-Vikings. We're having a great time at Circa. We're going to get a little bit more food freshen up, get ready to go, enjoy the game, and then we're coming in here live. Tomorrow morning show happens tonight. Monday morning show is a Sunday night instant reaction right here from Circa. We'll go game by game-ish. We'll go into a little bit more detail as far as the playoff picture and everything that happened here in Week 18.
Yep, absolutely.
Did I miss anything? We good?
Probably.
Great show. I think it's been fun.
Can't be
Shout out to
soliciting great show comments.
I think it's pretty
leading
good.
the witness.
I think it's a pretty good show.
Right,
so
but if it was
far.
terrible, he's not going to tell you after you're like, great
They're not
show.
going to tell us. They're not going to tell us. Ben, Janko, Will, everybody's doing a great job over here. We're going to give them a little bit of a break, and we're coming back right after Lions Vikings. So be right here ready. Subscribe, thumbs up, do the whole thing, and we'll be back in just a little bit with our full Week 18 review. Enjoy Sunday Night Football.